It's time to pull those belts tight, race fans. The front stretch is coming at you, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Now, here's Dan Taylor and Dirk Houston.
Well, good morning to you, race fans, and welcome to the front stretch presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. As always, online at joeskarting.com. Fast-paced, white-knuckle racing just across the river, 23rd Avenue in Council Bluffs. Been a little bit chilly lately, and today would not be the kind of day you want to be out racing in an outdoor racing facility. This is the perfect time of the year that you are indoors with it heated and well ventilated. joeskarting.com for more information on that.
I think they just ought to open up the back door and make a little pylon course out in the back in the snow and have some fun.
Yeah. I saw a video the other day of sprint car races on ice, and I thought, immediately I thought, well, how crazy could that be? But then I got to thinking, some of these guys talk about how some of these racetracks can get to be like ice, so it's all about car control and throttle control.
They take sheet metal screws and screw them into the big lumps in the tire.
Oh, really?
So you got like a studded tire. But no, out at, I think it was Lake Cunningham up north of Omaha there, they used to do motorcycle races on the ice.
Tuesday nights at Joe's Karting, or is it Monday nights at Joe's Karting is league night. Monday or Tuesdays? Did you see this? Is that Tuesday nights? I thought I had that right, but I should have double checked that. But Tuesday nights is league nights, and amateurs can get involved in it. It's a lot of fun. They've been posting times that apparently there's been quite a few track records broken of recently. So get over to Joe's Karting today. It may be a staple in the community. Maybe been around for what now, 8-9 years?
They've been around a while. They've outlasted any of the other indoor karting. Yeah. I know we had the indoor karting place that was out in West Omaha that was only around for a couple of years.
Over on 72nd?
Well, no, it was clear out like 138th and Giles. Okay. It was an indoor joint.
There was one on 72nd that I went and raced at over the holidays with my family, and I got sick as a dog because they didn't circulate the air very well. Oh. I got carbon monoxide or asphyxiated from all the fumes. It was terrible, and that was one thing when I sat down with Joe's Karting. They said, no, we know what their air circulation was like, and we circulate the air 10 times an hour. You'll smell the fumes, but you probably won't get sick. It depends on who you are and if you're really sensitive to it. But I've been to Joe's Karting hundreds of times, and I've never even had so much as a turned stomach.
Well, I'm sure the fire department's in there on a semi-annual, probably, maybe even a quarterly basis. Yeah. Probably goes in on a busy time and does air quality checks. I mean, they were down at the Dome last year in St. Louis, doing their checks. And Ben Shelton even told us the year before they had to shut down a couple times because of air quality. But when I was down there last year, there was no problem.
Didn't they have to do that at the Nebraska Kart Shootout a few years ago?
They might have on the turkey chase or whatever. Yeah.
I think it was the Nebraska Kart Shootout. The turkey chase is pretty fine, the way they handle it, but I remember there being, we just had to shut down for 30 minutes and let the air circulate, but then we were able to get going again. But yeah, Joe's Karting does a really good job with keeping that airflow and keeping it warm in there. So it's a great time to go over there and get to Joe's. But get yourself some gift cards and take advantage of that. Great holiday present for all those racers out there that are sick and tired of not being behind the wheel. They can head over to Joe's Karting, do a little road course racing. Indoors, heated, well circulated. It's a great place to go over to.
Yeah, if you don't have the $20,000 iRacing set up in your basement. Did you see Zach Ralston's post about that?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, $20,000. I was like, you can buy a new car for $20,000, Zach. That's.
I wonder what that carbon fiber car would have cost him if that $20,000 would have gotten a little closer. But he's trying to get one of those carbon fiber cars to go race full time next, or at least more often next year with the ARCA series. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, hopefully, good luck on it for him.
All right, today's show is going to be a little bit different. Typically, we try to do about 50% of the show is interviews, at least 50% of the show, because the less Dirk and I have to talk, the less work we have to do, and the more happier everyone is. Because you get to hear us, the other 50% of the show. We want to hear from somebody else. But today's going to be a little bit different.
With the studio time we were allotted this week, and again, it's pre-recorded, the PRI show.
Yeah,
in Indianapolis is going on this week, and gave us a little scuttlebutt because we were trying to get Bobby Pierce on, who does real good with us. Usually when we ask him to come on, he jumps right on board, but he's at the PRI. So basically everybody who's anybody's over there except
us. Yeah, for years, Chris Krug's been telling me, you got to get over to PRI. You got to go. It's where everyone is. And I said, I just haven't found a reason. By the way, this week, I found a reason. We may go next year. Because this show this time of year may be jam-packed with some great interviews in the coming weeks. So maybe we'll have to change around our budget just a little bit to include a trip to Indianapolis for the Performance Racing Industry show.
Yeah, I mean, it's But like a drive to Denver, it's 8-9 hour drive. It's not that big a deal. And I've been around there before and know my way around town just a little bit. And we can go, I know some places to eat anyway.
So today's show, I wanted to talk about, there's been a couple of announcements in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, some stories that have come out that don't really seem like that big of stories, but I wanted to kind of go through and talk about the implications of what these stories could have, and I think it's going to take all the show. Plus, we have some news that has happened, some silly season events or some silly season stories that have happened that I want to cover because they're going to finally start to wrap up some of the driver carousel, team carousel, and plans for 2019. So we're going to talk a little bit about that for the whole show today. And again, thank you to Joe's Karting for sponsoring turn number 1 and sponsoring the front stretch. Just a couple of more shows left in 2018 before we turn our heads over to 2019 and start working on those shows. But the big story I wanted to lead off with, and we'll see how long we get to talk about it, but NASCAR has hired a auditing firm, Deloitte.
It's
Okay.
actually Deloitte and Touche is the branch. And yeah, they're a big CPA firm. They're huge. They got an office in Omaha.
So what Adam Stern was tweeting about this earlier in the week, and he says that teams have agreed to the unprecedented step to help find a new competitive balance framework and determine if a budget cap can be introduced into NASCAR. This company is set to look at everybody's budgets and to see where they're spending money and how they're classifying it. They're going to create a unified where everyone's putting the money, because while one team may classify it as wind tunnel testing, the other team may classify it as aerodynamic in development.
Well,
and they may classify it in different ways.
NASCAR's tried to do it themselves. They keep cutting down on tires. It used to be an unlimited tire deal. Then they went to tire limits, and they're different at each track.
Yep.
You might get 7 sets at Michigan. You might get 15 sets at Bristol. But every year they tweak that a little bit and either add a set here or take a set away there. They've gone cutting the crew people down, and what the team can take. Now those guys wear those numbered patches on their uniforms at the track. If you ever take a close look at somebody, you'll see a number, and he's number DD07. So whatever that position is what he gets to do for that. So NASCAR's tried to do some of this. They've got the deals, engine program and stuff.
They've tried so many ways to find teams money. And like every time we've talked about, NASCAR is eliminating the over-the-wall guys. So that's going to save, $80,000-$90,000 a year. Well, the teams don't save that money. They just reallocate it.
Spend it somewhere else. Exactly.
So this company's goal is to go in and find out where each team is spending money. And it's not to spill the beans on, this team's spending more money here and that's why they're winning. It's to create an idea of where everyone's spending their money. And then NASCAR can hopefully go in and say, okay, you can only spend this much in this area, this much in this area, and this much in this area.
Well, I don't think NASCAR will divide it down like that. I think NASCAR is going to say, here's your budget. You can't spend any more than this.
So right now, the kind of the going theory is that a full-time, fully competitive Cup Series team per car is between $35 and $40 million. That's full force. That's the number that I've heard for Joe Gibbs Racing and Hendrick Motorsports is what they spend on each car for the entire race week, for the entire race season. NASCAR, if that number is true.
It sounds, to me, after being in the sport, it sounds just a little high, but I don't think it's way out of whack.
Now, I think NASCAR's goal with this is to say, okay, your budget's now $20 million. Maybe not that much, but they're going to cut it down to the point where teams are going to be forced by the rule book to stop spending money. And that's the biggest issue. And the fact that it is, as Adam Stern said, once again, an unprecedented step by all teams that have agreed to do this, that goes to show you that the Joe Gibbs Racing, the Hendrick Motorsports, they really are hurting to find the right amount of sponsorship dollars to be able to fully fund their operation.
Well, I don't see that as much as they've realized if they don't do something in this manner to, curb the spending, that the sport's going to go away because the little guy can't compete.
Right.
You talked about big teams spending lots of money. There's no doubt that Hendricks doesn't spare a dime anywhere.
Right.
They spend.
Right.
And they couldn't get out of their own way this year as a 4-car team. Gibbs still had some wins. Penske had some wins. And Penske, even though now they're a 3-car team, they're probably, I'll bet they're spending pretty close to as much, if not more, than Gibbs or Hendrick.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of money there.
Absolutely, and they're kind of in the research phase. I still think they've got a lot of room to grow to be a consistent top tier team. So they got, when you talk about room to grow, that cha-ching, and that just means a couple more dollars than what the other guys are spending that have already been there. But I love this move, and I think this gives me a lot of hope that in 2 or 3 years we're going to see some sort of a spending cap. And Adam Stern was quick to point out in his post that this cap will not affect driver salaries. The drivers will continue to be able to ask what the market will give.
Yeah, and see, to me, that's just totally wrong. Spending cap should be all included. You look, the NFL's got a salary cap. The one salary cap that they have in baseball is kind of a joke because if they go over, they just pay what they call a luxury tax. So if the team still got extra money, it's not that big a deal.
I remember one year there was the story that the New York Yankees paid more in overages than the Kansas City Chiefs or the Kansas City Royals paid their entire salary.
Yep.
And that's just an ineffective rule.
But exactly, that's my point. So what's going to happen if they catch a team going over the bump? You guys got to sit out a race. I mean, let's make it hurt. I don't want this deal. Well, it's a $5,000. I can spend $1 million extra and get a whole bunch of information for a $5,000 fine. They're going to do it all day long.
Right.
Now if their driver that's caught with the cheating has to sit out a race, so now he doesn't qualify for the playoffs, even if he's won 10 races, now we got a penalty.
Yep, absolutely. I think NASCAR figured it out this year that they have got to put more teeth back in their rules because teams are finding that the ends are worth the means.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, look at
do the crime, pay the time. The time ain't nothing.
Look at the 4-car. He was just as able to win the championship with 2 times his wins were taken away. The benefit of the wins were taken away 2 times this season. He had 8 wins on the year. If you're a dirt track fan, he's got 6 wins on the year.
Absolutely.
And I agree with that too. I think that other than a number in a rule book, as far as I'm concerned, Kevin Harvick won 6 races this year. He didn't win 8 races this year.
And you're a Harvick fan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Stewart-Haas fan, and I'm a racing fan. It goes for anybody. I think that all the conversations that we've had with those, they should have got DQ'd, they shouldn't have even shown up, they shouldn't have this, that. I'm a little bit leery on that stuff because I don't think Kevin Harvick should get penalized as hard because it wasn't him that set up the car. But, and my example to that is Matt Kenseth, who got in trouble at Kansas several years ago with the illegal engine. Well, Kenseth paid the penalty for all that, but it's not his engine. It's against the rules for his team to even touch that engine.
The team paid the penalty, just as Harvick's part of a team, just as in a football game. You got a holding penalty. They don't just move that offensive guard back 10 yards.
Well, Kenseth had to sit out for 3 races.
But, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
It ends up being a team penalty because his whole team suffered from him sitting out 3 races.
Right. And we're getting a little bit off topic here, but I think the hiring of this company is very, very promising because if NASCAR can figure out a way to create some sort of a spending cap that can then trickle down to even sanctioning bodies. I mean, look how much this would benefit the World of Outlaw sprint cars. I love sprint cars. I love racing. But when you talk about a World of Outlaw sprint car series, you're talking about 10 regulars, maybe 12 regulars.
Yeah, but you can't regulate something that's running 3, 4, 5 nights a week and all the travel they've got involved because, you're going to run into so much stuff as far as buying meals and all that kind of stuff. The sprint car, they started trying to regulate things clear back in the 80s. These guys were getting down and the cars were weighing stupid amounts, 1,300 pounds and stuff like that. So they put a weight limit on them. So because the guys were out buying, $1,000 worth of titanium bolts and stuff like that, totally not necessary things, So they put a weight limit on them,
But it's hopeful that it may be able to give some sort of framework in the future, something. I mean, because it's right now, everybody universally agrees that no matter what form of racing it is, it's way too expensive.
Well, the SLMR does that by restricting the engines. Every engine's restricted. You can go buy the $50,000 engine, and we're going to make it run like a $20,000 engine. So you might as well just buy the $20,000 one and be done with it.
And I think that's why you're seeing consistently 15 to 20 regulars on the SLMR, the Malvern Bank Super Late Model Series, as opposed to for the World of Outlaw sprint cars, you're seeing 8 to 12.
Well,
now,
also the travel's quite a bit different.
But that's one thing that Joe and Lisa have said. I was talking to Joe last week, and he said he had 36 racetracks contact him since the end of this season to come and race, and up to 400 or 500 miles away. And he said, "Guys, I'd love to. You got a great facility, and my drivers are actually interested in coming racing for you." but you're outside of our bubble, and we're not going to break that rule because the travel is the most expensive thing.
Exactly. And maybe Joe could look at something because it's kind of like when they did the Knoxville deal. That wasn't even a points race.
Right.
But I don't excuse me. They could do something like that maybe if they got enough interest and guys want to go to, wherever it happens to be, whether it's, PV down in Illinois or Tri-City over in Illinois. I don't know where they want to go, or who's contacting him, but that would be an option. But again, it would, he'd probably have to take it out of a points type race and make sure the purse was worthwhile for the guys.
Yeah, it's all about saving money. And any way we can save money is just going to help the drivers. And it's going to be able to offer more people to come into this. I mean, I don't know how many times people in my life that have said, oh, you're into racing. Yep. Oh, you're into dirt track racing. Yeah. What do these guys spend? I said, well, top guys for a modified, you're going to be $30,000 to $40,000. As long as you don't go wad that baby up on the front stretch and you got to drop another $5,000 in a new chassis or repairs. And
that's a weekly racer kind of car. I mean, that don't get you on the track for like a USMTS race. That's the motor.
Right. Right. It's way, way too expensive to go and do this stuff. And guys they're not paying for it out of their pocket with the money they're making at work. They're mortgaging this stuff. Most of it's on credit. And that's, my opinion, is the biggest hurdle with this sport. The racing is great, the excitement is great, and I think it's modern fan friendly because it's so fast paced and so exciting. But when there's not enough drivers to put on a competitive show, it's not that fun to go and watch. And the reason why there's not enough drivers is not because people aren't interested in it. It's because they're not willing to spend the money to get back invested in the sport. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back in turn number 2. We're going to continue our conversation about some of the silly season news, including Kurt Busch. We knew where he was going. Now we just know for sure.
And they still haven't said who's filling his seat. But
right. We know
it's not coming. A big secret. Yeah.
You never know. We've been surprised a couple of times with some announcements this week, but we'll see what's going on. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in turn number 2.
Every race car driver has run into the same problem. It's well past normal parts store closing hours, but you need that one to finish your car. The guys who brought you White Knuckle Racing by the River bring you Joe's Karting Racing Parts and Tire Store. Open until 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday and open until 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. A parts store that fits your after-hours schedule, and you can turn a few laps at Joe's Karting while you're waiting for your part to get pulled from their warehouse. joeskarting.com for more information.
We're hooked up in turn 2 and still showing the green flag on the front stretch.
Welcome back to it. Heading into turn number 2. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this beautiful day in December. You get your Christmas shopping done yet, Dirk?
Most of it. I actually got a box in the sitting on the porch yesterday, and I got there just as it was being delivered, so nobody could steal it. So.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that. I obviously have Amazon shipments that come to the house nearly daily. I mean, it's the poor UPS guy just basically lives at my house, and
you better leave him a Christmas gift.
Yeah, I should. I don't know. I'm hoping to pay his salary, so maybe that's gift enough. But anyways, those theft of items, I might have to start having them shipped here to work.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say you had to leave him a bottle of Oktoberfest or anything like that, but maybe a bottle of water or something.
For some reason, bottles of beer don't stay around my house very long.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I didn't want you to suffer.
It's the cats. We're going to blame it on the cats. Well, we joked about it last turn. Kurt Busch finally made the announcement. He's going to be heading over to Chip Ganassi Racing to drive the number 1 ZR71 Chevrolet for Chip Ganassi Racing again. Full-time ride, and it is a 1-year deal. And rumors are that this is the final year that Kurt Busch will be a full-time driver. He will probably be announcing his retirement at the end of the season sometime.
Well, I look at it as that will be the deal if he can't perform. If he wins a couple races, I see them signing maybe just another 1-year deal or a couple-year deal. But I don't think Monster wanted to go very far on this because they're going to want to see what his performance is. And obviously Ganassi wants to see what his performance is because if he just turns around and stays in Jamie McMurray's shoes, and has some top 10s but never really competitive, they're not going to leave him around. But with him working with Kyle Larson might prove kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think one thing that Kyle Larson is missing a little bit, while we obviously know he's an incredibly talented driver, I think one of the biggest assets to a successful Cup Series driver is attitude. And Kyle and Chase and Eric Jones, these guys are pretty laid back. They don't have a lot of attitude.
A lot of drive.
Well, I just mean that you got Kevin Harvick that's got attitude. When he'll get mad behind the wheel, and he'll move somebody. He's a pretty boisterous kind of a guy. Tony Stewart was like that, two of my favorite drivers. Kyle Busch is like that. I love that about him. And Kurt Busch was one of those guys too. You messed with him on the track, and he would take it into his own hands. He's not going to send you a text message 48 hours later and try to talk it out or go sit on a therapist's couch. He's going to deal with it on the track, and that's the way NASCAR fans like it. And I think that when some of these drivers are able to find that balance between enough attitude and the right amount of patience, that's when they're at their best. Kyle Busch is my prime example. That guy finally got it right between the right amount of push, the right amount of attitude, and the right amount of push back. And then also knowing when to hold back and let things happen. That's when he won his championship, and he's been the best he's ever been ever since.
He did it once, just as some of these other drivers that you've listed have, and people know that if they mess with him, they're going to get messed with back. I mean, just like when Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch got together, I think it was at Chicago this past summer. Yeah. And then, Busch was able to get back at him a turn later and take the win. And Kyle Larson wasn't mad. He goes, I knew it was coming.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think maybe Kurt will be able to mentor him a little bit and say, you can't take that stuff. How many times have we sat here and talked to local dirt track drivers that get pushed around on the track, and until they finally snap, they just keep getting pushed around. If I'm behind a guy and I know I can move him and there's no consequence, he's not going to come back and move me, or he's not going to come into the pits and do something about it, I'm going to move him. You better believe I'm going to. It's a free spot. That's a little extra money at the payout window. We got to get
you a race car one of these days. Yeah. you talk a heck of a lap. But.
My example is, and we had a long conversation with Tracy Ledger at the Homestead party, and I was very proud, although I don't generally condone fighting. I was very proud of Cody. 2017 when he got moved. He got taken out by a driver, and he went down into their pits and he popped the guy. And thanks to him, we all had a free keg at the Nebraska 360 banquet. Because the money that he was fined ended up going towards a keg, so we all got to have a little bit of beer on his expense.
Wasn't much of a fine then.
Right. But the whole ordeal is that people have driven him with much more respect since then. Now, again, while I don't condone fighting, it did what it needed to do. And
sent a message.
He got a little bit of respect, and now people race him with a little bit of a bubble because they know they can't push him around. I think it's the same way with Kyle Larson. I think drivers like Kyle Busch know if I move him, it's okay. But Denny Hamlin knows if I move Chase Elliott, I'm going to have to deal with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except there has been no retaliation from Chase.
Well, there was on the front stretch at Martinsville. We're not talking about coming fisticuffs, but and Chase's
I'm talking
fans,
about during a race where it was payback.
Well, but didn't he pay him back a couple weeks later?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing like. I mean, when I think of payback, I think of what Carl Edwards did to Brad Keselowski at Atlanta.
That might have been a little bit far. Well, I was thinking Talladega. Sorry.
Well, Brad and Carl got together at Talladega. It was Brad's first win. Mm-hmm. There was nothing dirty about it. They were banging. The fact that Carl got airborne into the fence was a pretty scary deal. But when Carl went for payback, he was 57 laps down or something. He was down a whole bunch and had been in the garage and had his car fixed, and he come out and just took him out. Now, like he said afterwards, he didn't mean to flip him, and the fact that happened the way he did it, that was kind of a fluke deal too. But, he went after him.
Same thing Kenseth with Logano at Martinsville.
Yeah. Tony Stewart's best quote in racing. He didn't crash him. He junked him.
So coming back around, Kurt Busch is going to drive the number one car at Chip Ganassi Racing. He'll be teammates with Kyle Larson for a year. Starting to hear rumors that Ross Chastain may be in line for that car if Kurt and the team decide that it is going to be a one-year deal, and Chastain will take over the number one car for the Cup Series.
Well, he definitely proved his mettle when he was in the 42 car in the Xfinity.
Absolutely. So a lot going on with Chip Ganassi Racing. That's great to hear. We talked about last week some of these new teams that are coming in, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we've got another new team coming into the sport.
Well, not really out of nowhere, because we've been reading about it and hearing some stuff, but now they've named a driver. They've got Barry Hill's going to drive for them, and they're going to run for Rookie of the Year. So now there's 4 guys in the Cup Rookie of the Year setup. And I still don't know how to pronounce that name.
I'm talking about the other team.
Well, I was talking about this one first.
Okay. We talked about that one last week.
You're talking about the one that bought Furniture Rose.
Right.
Spire Entertainment or something like that?
Spire Sports and Entertainment. It's an agency that worked with sponsors and drivers.
It's a bunch of sports agents.
Yep.
A couple sports agents that started this deal.
Purchased the Furniture Row Racing charter for the number 77 car. This is where things get a little bit confusing. They've owned a charter. They had it assigned to the 77, and then the 78 ran it in 2018, and now that charter is available, so the Spire Sports purchased it. No word on how much the charter went for, but typically these I think the last charter we know went for around 2.1 or 2.3 million.
But in that 2.1 million, that was the deal with the BK race team through the bankruptcy. There was some assets and some equipment involved in that, so that wasn't just the charter.
Well, the sources are saying that the charter went for what has been typically sold for a charter, and that's the only number we know of that.
Well, it was. I'm going to say it was between $1 million and $2 million.
Don't know a driver yet, and we don't know exactly a lot of the details. But this organization, they were quoted as saying, we go into boards, chair boards all the time. We sit in these big meetings, and we're huge proponents of the sport. Kind of felt like it was time for us to put up.
Well, they're selling their drivers to sponsors and stuff like that. So
And I believe Kyle Larson is one of their athletes.
Yeah, Kyle was one of their. They had a whole bunch of people listed.
I believe Rico Abreu is another one.
Yep.
Rico's one of their, and I believe one of the people that works for him is the marketing coordinator at Knoxville Raceway, Kendra Jacobs.
Oh, okay.
So I believe she's one of the heads over there that helps run that organization. She's the one that brought in the 5 Hour Energy sponsorship at the Knoxville Nationals, and so we might be able to see some of that kind of stuff. So it's very promising. Dirk, as much as I've been a proponent for NASCAR for the last decade, this was surprising, and honestly, it kind of feels like we may have turned a little bit of a corner with some of these new teams coming in. We've had a lot of new teams come in over the last 2 years, and while we have lost a couple, it kind of feels like we might see more consistent 40-car fields.
Well, the sale of the charters and stuff back and forth, is they know they're guaranteed a paycheck,
right,
for all the races.
As long as they show up, right.
Right. Mm-hmm. As long as they, attempt to qualify, they're going to be able to start the race, and then from then on, whatever happens, happens. But
and let me interrupt you real quick. That's huge for them because they can say, we'll have a car in the field every race weekend. Please sign on the dotted line sponsor. As opposed to a team that doesn't, they may not qualify for the race. If they go to Daytona and there's 44 cars that show up, they may be one of the 4 cars that don't qualify for the field. So it's a huge deal to have that charter.
That's what I'm saying. It's totally, and again, I'm not a charter guy. I don't like that part, just as I didn't like when they started locking in the top 36 in points and all this kind of stuff. Just, it was people complaining, well, my sponsor's not getting any time when I didn't qualify and I don't want to lose my sponsor and stuff like that. Well, then fix your race car and go faster. That's my look at it. But right now, with the way the sport's at, another sign of these new teams coming in is the fact that the drivers aren't, signing $10 million a year contracts and stuff. They're, the contracts all now are paid on performance. Mm-hmm. You're going to get X amount to show up and drive that car and race it, and then you're going to get X amount for the win or whatever, X amount out of the purse money. So they've got something a little more functional now that they can deal with. They don't have to try and pay somebody $10 million up front to come race their car. And I think with a couple of these new teams, I think they realize NASCAR is serious now with this Deloitte and Touche coming in and looking at this salary cap, not necessarily a salary cap, but a full spending cap for the whole team. And that's what I think's driving some of these teams to come in.
We're going to talk about some more stories in Turds 3 and 4 that I think are promising signs that people are now interested in or are invested in. They're now interested in investing in NASCAR by buying these teams and purchasing a charter or being a sponsor or whatever. There's a lot of things that have been happening over the last 6 months that I think people are starting to see, hey, we may be able to get in on the ground level with this kind of stuff.
We might have hit the bottom, and we're turning the corner, going to start going back up the hill. And it couldn't be any better time with TV contracts and stuff like that coming up. And I also think, as we've seen a bunch of articles talking about, a big shakeup on the schedule, the short tracks and stuff possibly coming in 2020.
Yeah.
That's another thing that, I know these guys know what the fans want.
Yeah. Let's take a break. We'll come back. I want to talk about that exact topic in turn number 3. We'll be back on the front stretch.
We all have that coworker that runs their mouth off at how great they are. They shot a 5 under par, 95-mile-an-hour fastball, bench press 375, brah. Wouldn't you love to shut them up by schooling them at Joe's Karting? Council Bluffs' premier indoor karting track, professionally designed so each corner is your opportunity to embarrass your coworker. Call Buddy for your next company outing at 712-256-5278. Joe's Karting, white knuckle racing just across the river on 23rd Avenue next to AMC 17.
If you love wings, if you love rings, and all kinds of other tempting things, great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Quaker Steak and Lube is the official watering hole of the front stretch and the home of MAV TV, featuring action from the Lucas Oil Late Model Series.
Great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Located on Mid-America Drive in Council Bluffs.
Feather the brake and get back to the gas. Dan and Dirk are headed into turn 3 on the front stretch.
Welcome back to it. Dan and Dirk rolling with you into turn number 3. And we've been having a lot of conversation about the state of NASCAR. And if you're a dirt track fan, bear with us. We'll be back to plenty of dirt track talking next week. But we want to take care of some of the big stuff because I think there's some big ground-changing things that are happening. One of the stories that came out, NASCAR, obviously, I think it was like the middle of this year, announced that they were interested in finding, they would, excuse me, I'm saying this wrong. There were reports that NASCAR would be available to be purchased. And while NASCAR itself, while the France family has never confirmed it, NASCAR has begun to acquire a lot of assets. One of them was Racing Electronics, the headphones company that you rent or purchase at the racetrack. And I'm drawing a blank. They also acquired another a company that was heavily into NASCAR.
Yeah, well, not heavily into NASCAR, but they acquired some outfit called ARCA.
Yeah, that's okay. You're right. They've added that asset to their portfolio. They have made an offer to purchase ISC, International Speedway Corporation. It is the organization that owns, I think, 12 tracks on the circuit.
I'm not sure how many they own, but it was originally a break-off from NASCAR, and they separated it. And actually, because it's a huge corporation, you're running racetracks all around the country, and it's a publicly traded company. You can go out and buy stock in it if you want to. And as far as I know, there's only 2 publicly traded racetrack companies. The other, Speedway Motors, Bruton Smith's company, and I think they've got 7 tracks, if I'm not mistaken.
Bear with me. Auto Club Speedway, Chicagoland Speedway, Darlington Raceway, Daytona, Homestead, Kansas, Martinsville, Michigan, ISM Raceway, Phoenix, Richmond, and Talladega and Watkins Glen.
That would be a dozen.
There's also Route 66 Raceway, which isn't on the Cup Series schedule. I don't believe it's in any of the...
I believe Route 66 is a drag strip.
Okay. And that may be that looks like that's a part of Chicagoland.
Yeah, it's right there with Chicagoland, just as you've got several drag strips in Bruton Smith's Speedway Motors outfit.
And then, so ISC, the International Speedway Corporation, owns 12 of the tracks on the circuit. Bruton Smith and Speedway Motors owns another portion of the tracks.
I believe there's 7 tracks.
And then I believe there's 2 or 3 independent tracks. Indianapolis is owned independently, and Pocono's owned independently. Is there a third one I'm forgetting of, or is it just those 2? I think the third one I'm thinking of is Iowa Speedway. That's not on the Cup Series schedule, but
I'm thinking Sonoma is independent.
I think you're right, because they don't have the Speedway Motors in their logo, and they're not listed here. I'll look it up real quick while we're talking. Here's the reason why we're talking about it. NASCAR offered to purchase ISC, and I think that was a very quiet, huge sign that NASCAR is ready to make some big changes to the sport to help appease the fans and the drivers. I think if NASCAR is able to acquire ISC, they're going to make a massive offer to Speedway Motors, and they're going to purchase all of the tracks on the schedule. And we're going to see a huge change in the schedule in what's the current contract end in 2020? I believe the current contract ends at Homestead in 2020.
I didn't know if it was 2019 or 2020, but it's one of those 2 years. But God forbid, I hope they don't do that. I do not want to see NASCAR literally monopolize the sport.
And I don't think it's going to be monopolizing it. I think it's going to be the only available option for them to make some serious changes.
Well, I think they can make plenty of changes with the other outfit only owning 7 tracks. Back 20 years ago, before you got involved in all this, Cale Yarborough was trying to start a whole nother group such as NASCAR. I don't remember what the name of it was going to be, but he was trying to line up things with tracks. That's when ISC bought some tracks, and that's when Bruton Smith, he only had a couple tracks. He bought some more tracks. They kind of forced it like, you don't have any playgrounds, guys, so you can't go anywhere. So that kind of shut that whole deal down. I mean, it's almost monopolized now, but if NASCAR owned it all, I don't think that would be a good thing.
But I don't understand how it would be a bad thing.
Well,
if they've got NASCAR, because NASCAR doesn't own any tracks and they don't have any infrastructure to be able to say, we've got other tracks we can go to, you guys play by our rules. If that's the case right now, which I think that is the case, I think that's the reason why they signed another 5-year deal, even after fans and drivers were saying, put more short tracks on the schedule, get rid of these 1.5 miles, get rid of these 2-mile tracks. I think NASCAR's in a corner now where they can't do that. If they purchase these tracks, the people that have been great business partners with them are taken care of. And they can go away and they can live off their billions of dollars for the rest of their lives. And then NASCAR can say, these 10 tracks, we're shutting you guys down. Sorry, but we're shutting you down, and these tracks we're going to run a smaller, more condensed schedule at.
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw NASCAR's short track program out there for you. They used to have most of the tracks in Iowa. Now they've got one. They used to have most of the tracks in Nebraska. Now they've got one. The monopoly game definitely didn't work on the short tracks. They had a great dirt series with the Busch All-Star Tour, but for whatever reason, they shut it down. And, I mean, that was kind of the downfall and really started the downfall of their short track program. Like I said, they pay a bunch of awards.
But NASCAR didn't own any of those tracks.
Exactly.
So how would them purchasing these tracks and being able to control the Cup Series schedule have anything to do with them not owning the dirt tracks that eventually switched to IMCA?
Because the monopoly part of it, they were trying to monopolize the dirt track racing, and they were very close to getting it done. I mean, when they came in in the 80s, and they standardized late model rules, which is what IMCA has done with, modifieds and whatnot. You can go to an IMCA track in Iowa, you can go to the same and take that same car and go to Arizona and be legal. NASCAR, when they first got into the short track racing in the early to mid 80s, you couldn't do that with a late model because Sunset had late model rules, Harlan had late model rules, Corning had late model rules.
Yep.
Now they tried to get them very similar so the cars could compete at all the tracks. But I don't know if the racers didn't like it. I thought the racers did like it because the Busch All-Star Tour was very successful. The fans, they always had good shows. They always had people at the races. I don't think promoters were losing any money on those shows.
Yep.
But for some reason, IMCA came in with a little bit different deal, and part of that, I do believe, was the rising cost of late models.
Okay. I'm still having a tough time understanding how if NASCAR owned all the tracks on the circuit and was able to control the Cup Series schedule to be able to make the changes that fans are demanding, how is that a bad thing?
But how are they going to make these changes? How are you going to change Kansas Speedway to Bristol?
You want I hate to say this because I love Kansas, but shut it down. If it's not selling, if the fans aren't supporting it, and the drivers don't like it, shut it down.
Well, then why do they have to buy it to shut it down? Why can't they just go ahead and not sign a contract with them next time?
I think because they're in a bit of a corner now to where ISC is saying you want to go race at Martinsville, you want to race at Homestead. How about racing at Phoenix and Richmond, where your racing is great? You got to take Kansas, you've got to take Darlington, you've got to take Chicago along with that. And NASCAR's out of the
NASCAR says we'll go to Bruton Smith and we'll just run 3 races at each of his track or 4 races at each of his tracks plus the other independent tracks, and ISC's done.
But the problem is there isn't independent tracks that can hold a NASCAR. I don't think they can hold it logistically. If we go to some of these tracks that have been shut down,
I'm talking about your Sonoma. Go to 2 races at Sonoma a year. Go to 2 races at Pocono. They already got 2 at Pocono. That's what I'm saying. Go to those racetracks and go twice a year. You do another one at Indy, even though I hate the place.
But that's not helping the situation. If Indy's the bad spot, why are we putting more races on there just to spite ISC?
Well, run the road course at Indy.
I think this is the simplest solution that NASCAR's came up with. We'll purchase these facilities, and they're going to add to their portfolio. When they're talking about selling NASCAR and somebody big coming in and buying them, they're adding more to their portfolio and saying, even though we're not going to race 2 times at Kansas, we're going to work with other organizations. We're going to bring more races into Kansas Speedway, and we're going to bolster their ability. Maybe IndyCar goes and races at Kansas twice a year from now on. Something like that. I just think that this was their solution. They obviously haven't had a good solution in the past because we've been talking about the 1.5 mile tracks for years now, and they continued to sign new contracts. And I honestly think it was because Bruton Smith, you want to go to Bristol, you want to go to Atlanta, you want to go to Sonoma, you got to take Texas, you got to take New Hampshire.
I personally think the racing in Atlanta and Texas is a lot better than racing at Kansas. That's just my opinion.
I would agree with you most of the time. Texas can get to be just as bad as anybody else.
And when they changed Atlanta to look like Texas, Atlanta used to be a 1 mile oval, big high banked oval. It was more like Dover, and the racing was fantastic there. And then when all these other tracks started coming in with the dog leg in the front, they tore Atlanta apart and put a dog leg in it.
Yeah, and I've been convinced for a long time, and it's going to take a lot to convince me otherwise. Because I don't know if you noticed, a little stubborn, a little slow, a little thick-headed. I think a lot of the issues that NASCAR has backed themselves into a corner, whether they meant to do it or they were just not paying attention at the wheel. The way these two organizations, the two major track-owning organizations operate, they're stuck at the number of laps. They're stuck at the number of race weekends, and they're stuck at a lot of things. They're not able to be flexible to where fans are saying, maybe not 36 races. Can we do, let's do 30 races. Let's do 26 races. Let's cut the schedule down. The Coca-Cola 600 is in my simple opinion, is the most obsolete race on the circuit. Just because it's been traditionally the longest race on the series, it is terrible to watch. And I'm so glad that for the last 4 years, I've had to go
terrible.
out. I've had to go out to the Charlie Clark Memorial and watch that race.
And you made me watch it.
Right. It's just, we don't need to go 600 miles simply because that's what we've done since they first started that race. It's done. It's had its time. We need to be flexible and change the races. We saw a little bit of flexibility with the addition of the road course, but that didn't change ownerships. It didn't change tracks. We saw New Hampshire lose a race, but Vegas picked one up. So the organization that owns it, Speedway Motors, Motors, they didn't lose any revenue anyway. I think this is a huge sign that NASCAR is interested in making significant changes to the schedule.
Well, with Vegas also ponying up and having the banquet now the last couple of years for the Cup Series, that also played a big part in that race getting moved.
And the city of Vegas ponied up a lot of sponsorship dollars because it makes them a lot of money that weekend.
And that's another thing, though, where you start talking about, the 600 being as long as it is. Well, there's a lot of sponsorship dollars driving on that, and TV money and everything else. So
I know, and it's unfortunately we've gotten into a situation where I think people blame NASCAR a lot for the issues. And while I agree, the captain goes down with the ship.
No, Brian Vance jumped. Brian did jump. He's not on that ship no more. He steered it into the storm and said, "See ya." Hey,
how funny would it be if I don't know if it'd be funny, but if Jim France, who's taken over for Brian,
Brian's uncle,
is doing a fantastic job. Seems like. What if he slipped something in Brian's pocket as he was leaving Sonoma, and he's like, "We got to get this guy out of the helm. This is the quickest way."
It
to
was
do
Watkins Glen, but
I thought it was Sonoma.
But
anyways,
I was going to jump into that when you said NASCAR was sleeping at the wheel, and I said, well, he wasn't asleep, but he was behind the wheel.
He couldn't pass the field sobriety test, but anyways, so I think that's a big deal. That if this deal goes through, I think we're going to start to see some big changes, and I'm excited about that. Maybe it is just one of the steps. Maybe they won't go and purchase Speedway Motors. Maybe they'll purchase just ISC. They'll move some things around, and maybe they'll add some road courses. You never know what's going to happen, but to me, the news that they're interested in purchasing ISC is one step that we could see a much more different schedule in 2021.
Well, I think if the NASCAR being for sale was a viable deal and a valuable deal, I think there's a guy from Omaha that might have had something to do with that and might have jumped in on that. And I'm talking about Mr. Buffett. He could buy NASCAR.
You think he would be but you think he would be
if
interested?
it was the right deal.
Yeah.
He buys anything at the right price. He don't care what it is.
And I've lost a little bit of faith in the guy. I mean, he's a smart guy. He's obviously got way more money than me. But when he purchased the Omaha World Herald, I thought that might have been a bit more of an emotional buy than a smart buy.
It very well could have been, but he's got enough money. He can buy stuff like that. He can buy a toy, so to speak.
But that's not his MO though. He's always been very smart about
he bought the Omaha Royals for a while.
Yeah.
And took a small turn with them, which to me, in hindsight, the fact that the Ricketts went and bought the Cubs, why didn't the Ricketts buy the Royals and get their feet wet? Then sell the Royals and buy the Cubs. But anyway, that's just something to me that was always just kind of a hindsight deal. But no, I think if Warren Buffett thought that NASCAR was any type of a valuable investment, he'd buy it.
We're going to I agree with you. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back in turn number 4. We're going to wrap this baby up on the front stretch.
Hey, look at that. You're sitting on your couch playing Halo, Madden, or NASCAR while your friends are at Joe's Karting. Each lap is an adrenaline-filled, heart-pumping, white-knuckle experience that you can only get at the Metro's largest indoor karting track. Eco-friendly Honda engines rip you around the professionally designed road course at breakneck speeds. Can you reach the 14-second lap bracket? There's only one way to find out. Put the controller down and get to Joe's Karting, 23rd Avenue in Council Bluffs next to Quaker Steak and Lube.
It's checkers or wreckers as we enter turn 4 on the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs.
Just about ready to wrap this baby up. Brought to you by Quaker Steak and Lube, the final turn of the show. We're going to wrap her up for today, and I've got to get my Christmas presents ordered. I talked to you about it at the beginning of the show. I've got them sitting in my Amazon cart. I know what I got to get. I haven't hit checkout yet. I got to get them shipped to me soon.
Somehow you got to have the room on the credit card to hit the checkout button.
Get over to Quaker Steak and Lube today for all the NFL action. As we're going to be talking about playoffs pretty soon for the NFL, aren't we? Well, we aren't, but the sport will.
Joe and Nick will.
Yeah, Joe and Nick in the afternoons here on 590 will. But
OSI.
All the stuff going on at Quaker Steak and Lube, a new fall menu, and they've got a limited edition sauce that they've just sent out. But it's not even a sauce; it's a rub. It was a jalapeno, no, a habanero.
I'm still out.
I want to try it.
I'm even further out.
I want to run over there and try that just because they've got some pretty new stuff coming out and great menu items. Get over to Lube today. The biggest reason, as a dirt track fan or a NASCAR fan, you want to get over to the Lube. They are the only bar I know of in the area that is broadcasting MAV TV on a regular basis. You can catch late model action, sprint car action, all sorts of great stuff, and they're going to be the home of the Chili Bowl viewing party in right about a month, right? I think it's like the third week in January is going to be the Chili Bowl.
I was going to say towards the end of January. So, 6 weeks, somewhere around there.
Get over to the Lube today. Say thank you for all their sponsorship of the front stretch, the Metro's only all-racing talk show, and we'll do our viewing party over there just coming up in a couple of weeks.
And if we get a good turnout for the viewing party, we'll probably put a couple cash pools together and some stuff like that, and make it a little interest in the evening. Chase
Briscoe is going to be down at the Chili Bowl, I believe. So is Christopher Bell. Bell's won it the last 2 years, right?
No, I don't think he's won it 2 years, has he?
I thought he won it 2 years in a row, and then before that it was Rico Abreu won it 2 years in a row.
Well, I know Rico won it back-to-back, but I didn't think Bell won it back-to-back. But he very well might have. I mean, I believe Christopher Bell just won the Dome.
In the midgets, absolutely. Well, no, not in the midgets. No, it was some guy. I didn't even recognize his name. Dang it, I had that information. I lost it.
I thought Christopher Bell won the midgets. He might have won a prelim night then.
Well, we know Bobby Pierce won for the second year. He was in his equipment, right? That wasn't the finish of the Dunn Benson Motorsports contract.
Yeah, nope. And we also know who the driver's going to be for the Dunn Benson car.
Yeah, that was announced earlier this week. That who's taking over for that?
Devin Moran.
Yep, Devin Moran's going to be driving that number 32 car. So
son of the $1 million man, Donnie Moran.
Past champions at the Chili Bowl: Christopher Bell, Rico Abreu, Brian Clausen in 14.
So Bell did win it 2 years in a row.
Kevin Swindell won it several years in a row, including 13, 12, and 2011, and then in 2010 too. So a lot of shockers. Swindell's winning the Chili Bowl quite a bit. So we'll see if Bell can go 3 years in a row. Abreu can come back and win one again. Or maybe Cody Ledger wins it on his final shot.
Well, have we heard from Josh Most whether Josh is going to go down and run the midget again? I think he told us he was.
I thought he said he wasn't making it down this year.
Well, maybe he said he wasn't making it down unless some funds showed up.
I think he was talking about the dome, but I thought he was talking about the Chili Bowl.
The dome was invitation only.
He was just a little bit too busy with getting the chassis up and running. He's not going to be able to go down and run it.
But I know Tracy told us that Cody's planning on going at least this year, and then they'll see from the future what's going on.
I think when Tracy says he's going to sell his equipment, first off, I believe about 50% of it, because it's not that he's lying. I just think that a lot of these guys have plans, and they're like, I don't want to get out of it.
Well, selling the midget was kind of a whim when they got into that part of it. I mean, they were well into their sprint car program before they did that. So if he decides to sell the midget, that would not surprise me, because they could use the funding for that in the sprint car.
And the most likely person that's going to, he'll probably talk Cody into buying it. Honestly, I mean, Cody loves going down there and running that midget, so Cody may talk his dad into selling it to him. We'll have to see how that works out. Talking a little bit more NASCAR news and notes while we got some time left in today's show. NASCAR says they are confident they're going to be gaining another manufacturer sometime around the 2020 season. Obviously, the last time there was a four manufacturer schedule or series was when Dodge was involved in 2012 when they won their championship with Penske and Brad Keselowski,
which happened to be their final race of their stint.
There seems to be a lot of that going on over the last 10 years. If you announce that you're going to win a championship, something like that. I mean, Furniture Row Racing they announced they were closing. They were really close to winning another championship.
Well, I was going to say if they would have won another one then, but they didn't announce that before they won last year. So, and nothing was said this year. But as it turns out, Brett Moffitt in the Truck Series is looking for a ride.
Yeah.
But they scrambled for funds all year over there at Hattori Racing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a bit of a second, but I want to continue talking a little bit about this. Manufacturers that have been rumored include Nissan, who has a sizable presence in the American automobile market and has been linked to the series. NASCAR President Steve Phillips said that there is a ton of interest in the paddock in adding new manufacturers.
Oh, there always is.
The great news is that the three OEMs that we have on board, Ford, Chevy, and Toyota, are all interested in having another, maybe even two, told a NASCAR Digital Media article earlier this week. The process is long, and we won't see something obviously in 2019, but we could see something for 2021.
Well, I mean, there's been rumors for about 3 years now of Audi, being interested.
And even Honda.
Yeah, Honda, outside the IndyCar, they just haven't done a whole lot anywhere else, where Toyota was into like the stadium trucks and that kind of stuff. And when Toyota came into the truck series and, finally started winning some races before they moved over into the Cup, they had their engine program put together and everything. Everybody, and I was still working then with NASCAR, we all thought that Nissan was the just next general step. And they came out and they built what they call their big pickup, a Titan.
Yep.
They built a Titan pickup, and everybody says, well, there it is. Next year they'll be in the truck series with their Titan pickup, and then they'll move along like Toyota did. But it just never happened, And maybe they looked at the writing on the wall and saw some of this downlaps coming, and NASCAR moving backwards a little bit, so they decided to wait. But, I think getting to 5 manufacturers would be fantastic.
I think some of these manufacturers are a little overloaded with what they have to produce. When you talk about Chevy having so many cars underneath behind their bow tie, they got a lot of engines they've got to produce and a lot of support that, sometimes we saw Furniture Row Racing when they decided to switch from Chevy to Toyota. They said that they were going to get better support at Toyota because Toyota has less cars, so they can offer more support like that. So maybe some of these manufacturers are getting just a little bit too spread out, and they're like, please, add a fourth, add a fifth.
Well, but going back to Chevy, the 77 cars announced they're going to run the bow tie.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of weird when they bounce back and forth, and these manufacturers like to support certain drivers and things like that. And then you've got these teams like when Stewart Haas switched over to Ford, they were, now they battle Penske, as the top Ford team. Yep. And, Chevrolet is still, their number one outfit is still Hendrick. And obviously Toyota's still number one outfit is over there at Gibbs. Mm-hmm. So none of that's going to change anytime soon.
But it'll be able to add a little bit more variety to the sport, I think.
Well, it's going to be diversity. Yeah. They're going to bring in more fans. If Dodge would come back, they'd bring the Dodge fans right back. I just don't see Dodge doing that right now. I think it's interesting. now that you've got GM closing plants and they're going to get away, the only car they're going to be making, it looks like, is going to be the Camaro, just as Ford's already announced the only thing they're going to make is a Ford. That's what they're racing.
There was such a big backlash when Toyota announced they were coming into NASCAR. People got very upset that a foreign company was coming in. Do you think we would see the same thing with if a Nissan or a Honda or an Audi came in?
Yeah, for the people that, just want to be that way.
Okay.
I mean,
you're right.
I've got friends right now that are complaining about GM closing their plants, but they drive a foreign car. Mm-hmm. Put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
That's all I got to say.
Well, and I had this story a long time ago. We were at when I was working at a Home Depot, and a guy walked up to the hardware store. He said, "I need this, and I said, "Okay, here's your section." He says, "Well, I'm never buying that because they're foreign made. I think it was like a Stanley or whatever." He says, "I'm buying this hammer because it's American made." Poor guy goes out and gets into a Chevy Love, which was manufactured in Mexico, and you're like, you got half the story there, bro.
Yeah.
One more story before we end up today's show. I wanted to get to what you were just talking about. Brett Moffitt, Iowa native, won the Camping World Truck Series championship just a couple of weeks ago. Came into the shop on Monday and was told by his owner that they were going to be releasing him for the 2019 season. The reason had nothing to do with performance or chemistry, but rather an extension of financial challenges that had plagued the team throughout their championship winning season. Long story short, a driver with a sponsor came to the table, and unfortunately, the team was forced to take that deal. And I agree with a lot of people on Facebook. It's a sad state of affairs, and it's been this way for a long time, that a driver can buy a ride. And I'm hopeful that this whole acquiring that, having that firm come in and look at everything, and possibly the spending cap will eliminate that to a certain extent, to where it's the rarity, not the norm. But unfortunate thing that the kid didn't even get to enjoy his championship for very long, and now he's out in the cold.
But one thing that it does open up with this Spire and Sports Marketing Entertainment Group team coming on, there's a championship caliber driver out there that's available with experience.
How much does it state that they had financial issues being able to field a fully furnished truck, and he was still able to win a championship? If I'm a big organization in the Truck Series or even the Xfinity Series, I'm looking at him going, kid did it on a small budget. Let's put him in a big budget team and find out what he can do. Well,
one door that shut on him today was there was an Xfinity ride available, but just today GMS announced that they're going to have John Hunter Nemechek in the 23 car for the next season. And that was a ride Moffitt could have taken. Obviously, definitely no funding issues with that outfit. And of course, everybody's still wondering why Spencer Gallagher stepped away. But it's irrelevant. In due time.
Right.
Yeah.
And congratulations to Chase Briscoe. He landed a ride with Stewart Haas Racing in the Xfinity Series as a second full-time car in the 98 car.
98 car, correct. So, we were trying to think of that last week.
Yeah.
Couldn't remember his name, but congratulations to those young guys getting their opportunities.
Well, when we find out where Daniel Suarez is going, now that we've recorded Thursday afternoon, he's going to announce it on Friday or Saturday. So check out the Facebook page. Make sure you stay up to date with all that information, and we'll keep you up to date there. From now on, we're going to shift more towards the dirt. Now that the NASCAR silly season is pretty much done.
We'll probably cover one turn of it every show here, because the stuff's going to keep rolling out in front of us. So we got to keep you guys updated, even though most of you guys probably read it just like we do.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. We'll be back at it next weekend, as we have just 3 shows left in the 2018 season, and then we're going to be moving on to the 2019 season. For Dirk Houston, I'm Dan Taylor. Thank you to Joe's Karting and Quaker Steak and Lube for all their support of the front stretch. We'll be back next weekend right here on AM 590.
Every race car driver has run into the same problem. It's well past normal parts store closing hours, but you need that one to finish your car. The guys who brought you White Knuckle Racing by the River bring you Joe's Karting Racing Parts and Tire Store. Open until 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday and open until 11 p.m. on Friday and Saturday. A parts store that fits your after-hours schedule, and you can turn a few laps at Joe's Karting while you're waiting for your part to get pulled from their warehouse. joeskarting.com for more information.
The official watering hole of the front stretch has you covered any day of the week with the best wings, great burgers, and amazing steaks. Each weekday from 4 to 6 is happy hour, featuring $1 off draft and well drinks plus $4 Luberitas. Mondays are kids' night. Tuesdays are all-you-can-eat wings for $12.95, and the lube even delivers to the Council Bluffs area. Like Quaker Steak and Lube Council Bluffs on Facebook for a full list of weekly events.
Get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Mid-America Drive, Council Bluffs.
This has been the Front Stretch Radio Show, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. To contact Dan or Dirk, find them on Facebook at The Front Stretch or email them at frontstretch590@gmail.com. If you missed any part of today's show or want to hear a previous show, subscribe to the Joe's Karting YouTube page, where you can find almost every Front Stretch show.